Hey everyone, it's May, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the May Lee Show. Thanks for joining. It is Thanksgiving week. Actually, it's Thanksgiving Eve because I'm shooting this intro to this episode on Wednesday. And I hope that everybody is trying to figure out what they're going to do. Everyone's saying that you need to be careful. We need to follow guidelines of, staying safe. So my family actually decided to cancel Thanksgiving in terms of getting together. In the past, I've gotten together with my mom and my brother and his family, aunts and uncles, cousins, and I'm actually the designated chef, believe it or not. I mean, this is the girl who wants to use the oven as storage for her shoes. But there are 2 times a year I actually cook and open the oven, and that is Thanksgiving and Christmas. Because for some reason, I became like the expert in cooking Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, which entails turkey and all the fixing. I have no idea how that happened, but I make one hell of a turkey. I mean, it really is phenomenal. But this year we're not going to do the grand celebration because we're trying to play it safe. My mom's 83 years old. She has some underlying health issues, but also it's about just being patriotic, and it's our civic duty because we're trying to help others, including frontline workers. So we are not doing the usual celebration. I'm going to have a very, very tiny little celebration with one other person and my 2 dogs. Um, but yeah, it's an unusual year. If we all play it safe, if we try to play it safe this year, we're going to have an amazing celebration next year. We'll all be able to get together and be with friends and loved ones and, family and, celebrate in the biggest way. But let's try to at least just hold on and play it safe through this year until we get this thing under control. So it is a time of Thanksgiving. We have to think about not only being thankful, but being grateful and also thinking of others, right? It is about loving others and showing that love. Right, Eggie? Look at her. Eggie's, for those of you who are listening, Eggie just sat down right behind me, my golden retriever. So, speaking of being thankful and grateful, my guest for this episode is someone I thought would be perfect for this theme. Because not only is she a phenomenal self-made success story, because she literally came from nothing and built something so unique and was a maverick in her field, that it's a phenomenal success story in that sense, but she's also a success story when it comes to survival, because she is a survivor of sexual abuse from when she was very young. And she came out with this admission just a few years ago, which was very, very courageous of her. And she's trying to help others with the trauma of sexual abuse. But she has such influence because she is Wendy Nguyen, who is of Wendy's lookbook. And a lot of you may know who she is because she is one of the most influential people on social media when it comes to fashion and beauty blogging. She started 10 years ago when there was no such thing. Like, people didn't even know what fashion blogging was. But she started with just like a handful of other people who started doing this as a hobby, not thinking that it was going to turn into anything. But now she's literally built it into this very successful business. And she is one of the most respected bloggers in the fashion and beauty world now. So Wendy's lookbook is followed by 2 million people on Instagram and YouTube and Pinterest and, all different platforms. So she's done phenomenally well. But because of her now story of surviving abuse and the way in which she was resilient and was driven to not let that hold her back, it makes her even more amazing and multidimensional as a human being. And she is also very, very much into the idea of giving back and philanthropy. So I have such admiration for her. She's only, I think, like 38 or something. So it's incredible how much she's done with her life, given what she survived from when she was very young to where she is now. But the one thing that I need to mention is that it was about 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago, where she did this video, and this video helped catapult her into the fashion world in a way that she didn't even expect. She did this video called 25 Ways to Wear a Scarf. Excuse me, 25 Ways to Wear a Scarf. And I remember watching this video several years ago and being completely like enthralled by it, because I was just like, who is this Asian woman who has like the creativity to figure out how to tie a scarf in 25 different ways? I'm like, crikey, I can barely tie a scarf one way. But I watched it and I was like, wow. And to this day, I use one of the methods over and over and over again. It's called the twist and pull. The twist and pull. Here it is. I love this technique. I use it all the time. I think it's so cute. It looks very chic. But anyway, this video has stood this test of time, because if you watch it now, you'll still be like, oh my God. Oh my God. This is so cool. So, but that actually brought recognition to Wendy, because the video went viral, and that started her career even more as a fashion blogger and a fashion influencer. So anyway, I had such a wonderful time talking to Wendy, and this interview, it is intense, it's brutally honest, and it is brave and courageous. So yeah, I think you'll really enjoy it. And it is certainly an interview that will give you a sense of hope, and will really give you an idea of what it's like to be so resilient and so courageous, and hopefully will inspire you in one way or another. So here's my interview with Wendy Nguyen. Wendy, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to meet you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
And it's, let's tell everyone what happened. So Wendy, we were going to try to get you on the show like
Yeah.
in person way before COVID, right? Before
Yep.
the madness began. And because you were going to be coming out to LA. And so we were trying to set that up. And then of course the pandemic hit and all bets were off. So
Yes.
I then was like, why don't we just get her on now? Because this is how I'm doing the show. So here you are.
Oh, I love it. And we're comfortable at home and everything, and I get to see you, so it's perfect.
I know. At some point, we will meet face to face when we can get things under control. But for now, it's good to have you. So, Wendy, there's so much to talk to you about, and we had a nice little phone chat a few days ago before we did this interview, and I have to say, you blew me away with your honesty and authenticity, and I was really looking forward to this interview, because I'm like, this is the kind of gal I want to talk to, who's going to be so open and honest about every aspect of her life. So I'm like thinking, God, what do I even begin with? But let's start with the fact that here you are, this woman who is self-made, who has this incredible following on social media, on Instagram. And of course, it all started with YouTube viral videos.
Yeah.
How are you feeling right now about the life that you have built up to now? Because it's a pretty phenomenal story, I have to say.
Oh my gosh, May. I don't really think about it that much.
Really?
It's strange to say. Yeah, I
No.
don't. As in, I think for me, I worry more about not surviving so much that I don't really. I take for granted what you just summarized, and there are days when I give myself, I think, permission to like sit down and reflect. But most of the days, I think I'm just so head down and just like, keep on going straight,
Yeah.
because I think I've been taught that way for so long that I forget what's it like to kind of look around a little bit. But as I'm getting older, I feel like I'm getting better at reflecting and appreciating and taking the smaller moments. But I really never think about it that way. I still don't think I've, in a sense, built anything. I think I'm just going through life and kind of
What?
wherever door is open, I just go. Yeah, I know it's weird. It's weird that I know. It's weird to say that verbally too, but I think that's just how I process information and I process journeys in general. Because I think there's an ultimate fear that I have that if I sit and indulge, I'm going
Mm,
to, for some reason, not survive.
right,
You know,
right.
and that takes retraining to not think that way. But
What,
it's a very slow step.
that's really interesting you should say that, Wendy, because I think there are a lot of people and a lot of women,
Mhm.
me included, who suffer from sometimes this imposter syndrome that, we hear about, right? We think, really, do I deserve this? Is this really me? I'm going to be found out by as some phony, like I'm not really who everybody thinks I am. And I think it's something that women, especially, we underrate ourselves a lot, right? Even
Mhm.
the top women CEO positions, even I had Senator Tammy Duckworth tell me that recently,
Mhm.
that she sometimes suffers from imposter syndrome. So I think that's a
Mhm.
really much more of a female thing than it is a male thing. So, but for you, for you to say that as well, it's always surprising when I hear that from women who are extremely successful, and yet maybe that comes from a little self-doubt, maybe, or is it drive? Is it just, yeah, and fear, perhaps?
Mhm. Mhm. I think it's a balance of what you just said: drive, determination, and grit. A lot of grit,
Yeah.
right? So I think what I do especially is that whatever I'm working on, I separate myself from my work. So
Yeah.
as I know that Winnie's lookbook reflects, kind of my preference in fashion and lifestyle and cats and plants and everything, but I still have a tad bit of a remote distance from that, because I think if you sit there and count your likes and count your engagement, sometimes it really is very, very stressful, and it
Yes.
almost does a disservice to your own mental health, right?
Yes.
So I think being in social media for about 10 years now, I've learned that those likes and those comments don't necessarily reflect my self-worth, but it just reflects my work,
Yeah.
right? And then I'm motivated to produce better work, but it doesn't really speak to necessarily who I am, inside in that sense.
I love that you're saying that, because I think that is something that a lot of people, both very successful and then the average person who's on social media, they're basing their value on that idea of how many likes are they getting, how many followers are they, do they have, how many views do they have, and that is really screwing people up, right? Because
Mm-hmm,
if that's
mm-hmm.
what you're valuing your self-worth on, then that's a pretty difficult gauge to go by in life. So for
Right.
someone like you who has, 2 million followers on all of your different platforms and has been very successful in building that, for the last 10 years, how do you then separate that? Because I think it's easier said than done. So if you've successfully been able to do that, I would love for you to share that information with the audience, because I think that's something that people struggle with all the time. I do too. I look at how
Yeah.
many followers I have. I look at how many followers have dropped off, and I'm like, wait, what's
Mm.
going on? So I
Yep.
think that's a really
Yep.
interesting piece of advice if you can share that, if you figure that out.
Yeah. So that's something I don't do, which is, I think, has
Okay,
saved my
good.
mental health, which is that I don't look at the decline as much, because again, I think that gauges how, I think your ego and your worth is very fragile.
Yeah,
And some days you can have a great incline, and some days you can have a great decline, or and it kind of balances out usually at the end.
right.
So I don't really look at the decline as much, and I actually don't look at the incline either. So it's both ways. It's not like you focus on one thing and not on the other. But I look at my engagement and my audience. It's almost like a portfolio of how their reaction is to my work, right?
Mm,
So when I wear something on Instagram or on the blog, I always wear it with the thought of that will be bookmarked if someday I would go back and wear that outfit again to like a dinner party or whatever it is.
yeah,
So it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a fabulous person walking out with this fabulous life. It's not really like that. It's about me putting together creative work so that I can actually bookmark it one day too.
right,
So again, I think that kind of detaches me from that feeling of needing those likes and needing those followers in that sense,
right,
and really focusing and honing in on, I think these particular type of work is what my audience really appreciates and likes. So I'm going to hone in and actually create more of that.
right.
Or, hey, I want to deviate a little bit and I'm going to test out this and that. So I don't know. I think it makes the whole creating process a lot more fun and not so. And as you know, and you know, with news and you're in Hollywood too, is that you are gauged on your last work, right? You're as good as your last
As
piece,
your last
right?
story, as your last movie, as your last show. Exactly.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think, for me, I reflect on that and go, if the last one didn't do so well, let me just kind of, massage a little bit and move on from there. But I don't try to sit too long on that. And some days
Right.
are much better than others.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that every day is easy, but some days are much better. And other days are just, I got to move forward.
And I think also for you, Wendy, and I think over the years for me, I've reached this realization is that you personally have to genuinely like what you're
Hmm.
doing and
Hmm.
like what you're putting out. It has to be authentic. And people aren't idiots, they can
No.
smell inauthenticity, disingenuous, behavior and content when they see it. Right. So
Oh,
you
yes. Oh,
yourself
yes.
have to really love what you're doing and love the outfit and love whatever you're trying to promote. Right.
No, it's 100% true. I think, for me, I actually love the photography and editing side a lot more. So after we finish, going out to doing a shoot, I'll sit there all night and that's like my time. And, before blogging, I used to work at Wells Fargo and I would never after work sit down. This is my time to do more spreadsheets. Like it was never a thing, right? Like I'm not like,
Right.
oh, let me look at more accounts and try to figure it out. It was
Right.
more like, okay, that's work. I get to go home and do whatever. But this is just, I live and breathe it every day. So it doesn't
Mm,
feel like work. It
right.
feels more about creating content that's hopefully meaningful to someone else that
Yeah.
I enjoy
Yeah.
and that hopefully we can share in this community space.
Yep.
Right. But that's it. But I love my job. And I mean, I won't trade it for anything in that sense because I've been in jobs I did not like and I really treasure those that I really appreciate.
I mean, that's what I find so funny is that you were in finance for several
Yeah.
years, right? After you got out of Cal, you went to UC Berkeley.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you were thinking you were going to be a banker, right? But you always had this love of fashion. I read somewhere that you got your first fashion magazine when you were something like 8 years old. And that's
Oh,
where the
yes.
love affair began, right? So,
Oh, my
so, so
God. Yes.
back then, even back then though, because you had this love of fashion, but I'm sure you probably didn't think at that time that you were going to create a career around this idea of fashion and beauty and all of this stuff that you do now.
No, no, absolutely not. I'm so, well, I can't believe you read that. That was, thank you.
I've
No,
researched.
that was my first. So that was how I actually learned English, watching I Love Lucy and reading a
Oh,
lot of fashion magazines. And I've always loved it. I've always wanted it for my birthday. Like I've never wanted anything else, just fashion, like magazines, and that was it. So
okay.
even to this day, as I got older, my friends would still get me magazines for my birthday because they knew I love it so much. But when I was 8. I saw, what I saw and I loved it. And I was just consumed by it. And I went to my mom at the time and I said, "Oh, mom, like one day I want to be in this." And I think when I said that, I didn't meant that be in the magazine. I think I wanted to be in this world,
In the
wherever
industry.
this
Okay,
world was,
right.
this fashion, right?
What was it about fashion that intrigued you so much?
I think it was just the limits of what you can push, your creativity. And maybe because, growing up poor, I didn't really have much, right? So when I saw this, I was like, oh, I can do this and play with textures and colors I've never thought was possible in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
But so I was telling her that, and I said, I would love to do this one day, or I love to. I think my words were, I would love to be in a magazine, and I didn't really mean that. And she looked at me and she said, "Wendy, only pretty people get to be in magazines."
Oh, oh,
So
oh.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
from that day on, I that that dream shattered for me at a very young age. So from that day on, I
Mm,
thought, okay, well, since she said that, that meant that I couldn't be in fashion, but I was probably good enough to be someone's assistant, right?
okay.
Like I was probably getting coffee for someone
Right.
and working myself up and trying to figure this out. But I would never imagine, now being, I've
You're
been,
the cover
published in
girl.
magazines. Yeah, yeah,
You're the cover. You're the model. You're the stylist. You're everything. So that's what's
yeah.
so incredible.
But this was a complete, that was 30 years ago. It's a complete, 360 turn for that.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So yeah, again, that's what I love about your story is that you may have had this wish, but you never thought it would actually manifest into reality,
No,
but it did. And that
no.
says a lot about your drive and your vision. When you have a vision that's so powerful, it is incredible what a human being can do to make that vision come true if you have that passion and that drive, which you obviously did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And a heavy dose of luck too, I think. I have to say that because I think timing is important. Right? I
Ti-
think if
yeah.
I were to do what I do now, I think it would be completely a different ball game. And it has to be resetted in a different way of approaching it. But
Right.
10 years ago, there's no such thing as a fashion blogger. There was literally, I think, five of us. It was like
That's
Ami Song.
incredible.
It was like me. It was Blair. It was like Kiara, and like just a few handful. And that was it.
That's
And we knew each
amazing.
other because we saw each other at events, and that was that little group. And there's how the joke was that it's not genius when you create a trash can when the trash can never existed, right? You can
Right.
create anything because it never existed, right?
Right.
So at the
Right.
time, whatever we did was new because it didn't happen before. So that liberty gave us so much breath to grow our careers. And back then, there was no such thing as career, right? It was just
Right.
a hobby. And
Yeah.
hopefully that hobby will get you paid. But that was it. But, slowly as the fashion industry caught up, we were an arm of their marketing engine in
Yeah.
that sense.
Right.
And they had to integrate us into it, as print media was slowly becoming much more, I think, more of a memory than necessarily a modern indulgence. They had to figure out how to get on to new media, which is
Yeah.
what we were at the time. So, back then I did not, back then doing it, I didn't think it was a career that I could actually sustain this long. And then as I kept on going, I realized, oh gosh, now I'm aging. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Oh, no.
it's Hollywood. I mean, in that sense, it's like you have the shelf life and you go, okay, so how can I make the best of my shelf life in that sense?
Right.
And how do I create meaningful content and community interaction that I can still have a conversation with 10 years later?
Well, I mean, I think that is what's important, and that's what you have done. You've continued to evolve and not stay sort of, one dimensional. You still obviously, are a huge influence in the fashion and beauty world, but you've also now taken it to a different level of engagement, like you're saying, and
Yeah.
community service and sort of philanthropic, concepts as well, which leads me to a sort of a darker period of your life, which had a great influence on why you feel the way you do now about giving back, particularly in the area of foster care and foster children. Let's go back to
Mhm.
something that you were willing to talk about openly just a few years ago for the first time, and that is the sexual abuse that you
Mhm.
endured starting from when you were 5 years old, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Cousins, and it was kind of a series of cousins who did this to you. Um,
Mhm.
for you, boy, I mean, how do I even ask this question first? You kind of internalize all this for many, many years. Why did you finally want to share this with the world?
Mhm. That's a really great question. You know, I think the sexual abuse happened when I was 5, and I didn't realize it was sexual abuse until I was much older, right?
Right.
And then as I think as I grew and tried my best to heal, I realized there was a very strange phenomenon that was happening, and it was I couldn't remember anything from 0 to 8.
Hmm.
Like, how like you as you get older and you meet a whole bunch of people and they're like, I remember doing that when I was 4. I remember doing that, when I was 3, or I remember going here, and I have no memory, zero,
Right.
between that period.
Right.
And my memory consists of other people telling me how I was
Hmm.
back then. Like, yeah, like, you don't you remember when you did this? And I'm like, uh-huh. And then I would just dock it in my head going, that must be a memory. That's true because
Right.
someone told me that,
Okay.
or your grandfather lived next to a lake and used to take a whatever. I had no idea. I don't remember any of that, and I couldn't figure out why was there this large absence of, I'm sure, very meaningful experiences.
Hmm.
And I don't even recognize myself in photos, which is the strangest thing. There was one time
Wow.
when I looked at a photo and it was my mother, because I remember it was her, obviously. It was another girl sitting next to her. I thought that was me, and it was my cousin. It was another girl cousin. And I had, like, there's like almost a disassociated experience outside of my own childhood, and I couldn't understand why that was
Why?
happening.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think as I got older, I realized that something must have happened that made me not remember all these things, and that was probably my own psyche, my own, internal self protecting me from
Protecting
all that.
yourself.
And then
Yeah.
as I was digging, I realized I really only remember like two things when I was that young, which is one, the sexual abuse. See, the funny thing is that I don't remember anything, but that experience I remember in detail, which
Huh.
is, I think, the way trauma works in that sense.
Right.
I remember where my head was. I remember how cold the tiles were. I remember where my grandmother was. I remember how he was on top of me telling me certain things and like, don't tell grandma what I'm doing. And at the time, I really didn't know what that doing was. I
Right.
just
You're
thought
5.
this was right.
Yeah.
This is happening, but I don't know what it is,
Right.
And then another time was when I almost like drowned in this pool thing. So that was like two separate experiences I remember, and that was it. And
Wow.
as I went through life, I started kind of digging and unpacking things, and certain things were happening where I couldn't make sense of it. And then I realized that it was rooted in this trauma that I could never kind of unsolve.
Yeah.
And what made it, I think, more difficult was that my family still had interaction with my cousins this whole time. So I think
So
they
let's,
lived life
Wendy,
not knowing the truth.
let's tell everyone that it was not just at 5, one cousin,
Yeah.
and then again when you were a couple years older,
At 12.
12, another
At 12.
cousin,
Hmm.
and then
Yeah.
a
And then again
third
at
cousin at
14.
14. And this was
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
because the two cousins later on, they had moved
Yeah.
into your the family home because you guys had an extra
Right.
room. And during that
Right.
time, they were abusing you, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right. So when I was 5, that happened. And honestly, I can't tell you how long it happened for. All I know is that, my next really strong memory was when I left Vietnam at 8.
right.
So between 5 and 8, I really don't know the duration for that experience, to be quite
Mhm.
honest. So I got here at 8 to America, and then my family really lost everything that my dad worked so hard for in Vietnam, and my dad was also a prisoner of war too. So as I got older, I understand what trauma did to him
Sure,
too. In that sense,
sure.
I don't think it excused what his involvement with my abuse, but I I understand it wider in that sense.
And when you say his
So when I
involved,
came here,
sorry, when you say his involvement in
yeah,
the abuse, you mean that your parents chose not to believe you
they saw it.
and they saw it. Okay. And they just sort of turned a
Yeah,
blind eye. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they saw him coming in and out of my room.
Right.
They saw me kind of interacting very differently. I was very quiet. I didn't really say much when I was that young. And they also like saw, why would your cousin, who were, at the time years older than you, would go in your room at like 5 a.m. and come
Mm,
out? Like it didn't. Me as a woman now, and as someone who one day might have kids, that would never fly. Like in my book,
yeah.
there's like no one can be coming in and out of my daughter or son's room at 5 a.m. Like I don't
Right.
care who you are, that's just not going to work
It's
with
not
me.
natural.
So I
Yeah.
think for them, I think I honestly don't know what they were going through, but whatever they saw, I think it was probably safer for them not to admit that was happening
Sure.
than for them
Yeah.
to actually, deal with it,
Right.
which is exactly kind of what was happening. But so when that first happened, when again we were not in the best financial position, so they needed to rent out an extra room in the house, and that extra room happened to be very close to my room. And we're talking about like these tiny little rooms.
Mhm.
And so 12, my cousin at the time was 24,
Ugh.
and he actually was a correction officer.
Oh my
So,
God.
which made things more complicated.
Oh my God.
He was an ex-Marine. So it's like every fear factor that was involved kind of happened in this very small bubble state. And whenever I was in this position, I would just completely zone out. And at the time, there was a VCR in his room, and I would just literally like stare at the VCR. And I saw the red numbers just clicking down, and I would just stare at it. And
Oh my
that was my
gosh.
morning.
Wow.
And I thought it was normal. I thought it was
Right.
like, to some extent, I thought it was normal. And then when it got to the point where I thought, I was talking to a friend, and she said, That's never happened to me. And then that's when I realized, wait a minute,
Something's
this is
wrong here.
this is not.
Right.
Yeah. And
Right.
it was layered with a lot of fear. So eventually I realized this is, this feels very strange. Like, don't tell mom, don't tell dad.
Yeah.
If you tell them, they're not going to love you anymore. So there was just constant,
Well,
I think,
that message
manipulation of,
alone, yeah, that message alone to, again, a child saying,
yeah,
if you do this, then you're going to lose your parents or they're not going to love you anymore. I mean, that's going to scare any kid, right? So it's that fear I'm sure you had that, you didn't want to break something.
right,
And that's the
yeah,
control. That's the control that predators have
right,
over
right.
those
And then
the victims.
and over time they just train you to believe that this is a sense of normacy,
Yeah.
right? And over time you just get comfortable with the sense that this is just my life, and I'm so sorry, my kitty's
Oh, look,
in here.
your cat is making an appearance.
No,
Oh, look at that. She's like, oh, mommy's talking about a difficult time. I'm going to come over and comfort. Oh, no, it's
he
no,
knows,
no, they know.
right?
The animals know. So, oh, that's really sweet. Okay.
No, he's my therapy kitty. But it's, and then, I, at a point I knew that I could not live that way.
Yeah.
And I had another cousin that, and remember, this is a Vietnamese household with lots of cousins. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? This is a large
Yeah.
kind of family dynamic. So at the point, I said, I confided in another cousin. I said, you know what? I He actually saw it, it's another episode of my life that I actually don't talk about as much, but it probably kind of glues the larger picture together. But I actually had an episode where I tried to commit suicide, and he saw that. And then he said, "What's going on with you? Why are you doing this?" And I think in his mind, I was just acting out.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, "No, no, no, I can't live like this." And I told him what happened, and I said, "This cousin, blah blah blah." And he said, "You know what? I have a plan. We're gonna get him out. So we're gonna figure out how to get him out of the house or move out, and then you're safe." And I said, "Okay." I mean, at that time I was like 14. I was like, "Okay, that sounds like a good plan to me." There was, any plan was a good plan.
Right. Right. To get out. Yeah.
So the plan worked, and he basically moved in. So that cousin that at the beginning was helping me through it moved in and took his place, and then the abuse happened with that cousin.
Oh, are you
So
kidding? So that was the third cousin. Wait, initially he was helping you and then he victimized you. What the
yeah.
hell?
And, see, I think that the hardest part for me, even when I'm talking about it now, is that with that particular experience, it became so reality shattering for me because it was a good guy turned bad guy
Ugh.
that I still have a hard time talking about it. Do you know what I mean? Because I think if the person was quote unquote a bad guy, it's easier to talk about because like this is what happened, this is what he did, this is the trauma. But it's harder to talk about it when you're going, he showed you affection, he showed you protection, well, whatever you want to call it. And then it trailed onto this. And then I think as that young age, I couldn't understand why this world was shaping the way it did.
Right. It didn't make sense. Well, God, Wendy, and I mean,
Yeah.
the thought that comes to my mind then is, I mean, talk about a total shattering of trust of any kind for you, right? I mean, already you've been victimized twice, and then this good guy, like you're saying, this hero seemingly
Mhm.
turns into
Mhm.
the villain. So
Mhm.
how do you then at that age know anything about trust? How do you even define that? Or is it even part of your psyche at that point?
Right. So I think trust evolved to survival because there's no one that I can trust but myself now, right? Which is,
Wow.
I know what my truth is. I know this is happening.
Right.
I can remember it now because before I couldn't remember it, right? At 5, I couldn't remember it, but now I can. So I know it's happening. I know it's reality. And I have, a few feedback here and there saying this is not my friend's reality who are young girls also. So I was slowly understanding the world that was happening around me.
Yeah.
But, on top of kind of that, my parents knew about the second abuse too as well. My father was very physically abusive. So my father had, and I think again, it comes from his own trauma and his own, being a prisoner of war and his own issues too.
Right.
And my mother was very verbally abusive as well. So I think for my dad, and he was a very, very smart man, very, very highly educated, very successful in Vietnam, very smart. And when he would, physically abuse me, he would only hit me in spots that no one can see, right? Because he knew
Oh,
that
wow.
he was not like the level of, I don't know what it is. I think cruelty is it's a very harsh word for him, because I don't think he meant it to be like that, but the level of thought that came into it
Right.
is very profound,
It was
So
almost
he would
like
only,
premeditated. He knew.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, in that
Yeah.
sense, because he's like, if you go to school and you have, bruises, and I bruise very easily, and I've
Okay.
always bruised very easily, um, they would get in trouble, and the social services were called a few times in our home already, so they knew kind of what was
Oh,
happening, but they
okay.
didn't catch
Okay.
kind of the sexual abuse part. But no, but he would hit me in my head. So I'll walk to school with bumps on my head all the time, and no one will see it, because
Mm,
and he'll hit me in my tailbone, and you can't really show that in that sense, like, publicly.
right.
And then there's when I do have a few bruises on my arm, I was wearing turtlenecks in the summertime in like SoCal,
Yeah.
like, like and I would never wanted to go home. Like, I would make up all these fake projects to be in school for as long as I could.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think the teachers didn't really get that. They thought I was super studious. Like, oh,
Yeah.
when he wants to work all the time. It's like, you know
Right.
how that is, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was I just didn't feel safe being home. So I didn't have my parents to lean on with this. And I saw that they saw, but yet they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I just felt at 15 and a half at the time, I felt that, like, I had to survive. And there's this I don't know what it was called, and it's really hard for me to say it, but I just felt like there's something that came out of me that said, you just gotta live. You just gotta survive. Whatever that
Yeah.
meant, to survive is to survive. So at the time, I knew only one person I can call. It was an old school friend's parent, and I honestly don't know why I thought this person was the best person to call. She also happened to be a teacher. I did not know that.
Mm,
So I called and I said, it's something's happening at home. This is happening. Like, I don't know I don't know what to do. And she goes, stay there. I'll pick you up. So my parents at the time owned, a laundry service.
hmm
And it was just timing where their van literally pulled up into the driveway, and she pulled up right after them. And I have all my stuff in a trash bag. And you know how when you're in the zone, everything just fades and your ears just start ringing really,
Yes.
really loud.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
how I felt.
Oh,
Nothing,
wow.
nothing was going on except my bag, and just beelining this car that this woman, who I honestly have never really had really much contact with.
Yeah.
You know, I knew who she was, and I called, and that was it. So I ran, and I just got all my stuff, put it in her car. And then I remember my parents screaming at me as I was running, because they're probably super confused, not knowing where I was going. And I got in the car, and that was it. And I left, and I never came home.
And you never
That
came
was
home.
it.
And that's when
Yeah.
you went into a home for girls, right? And
Yes.
it was basically a foster care sort of home, right?
It's
Um,
it's an orphanage.
yeah.
It's a group home. So what happens is that you get filter all the girls, and I'm sure this still happens now. I don't think the protocol has been any different, even though I've been there for back then. It's basically a huge community group home
Right.
where all the girls get filtered, and then from there they get placed in foster
In
homes.
foster care.
So I
Yeah.
was exactly. So I
Yeah.
was in the group home for 6 weeks and 4 days.
Okay. And then you were placed in a foster family with, I think this family had a couple of other foster kids as well, right? With you.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
when I was there, I had basically three other foster sister, and kind of like kind of like a pseudo foster sister, because that was her granddaughter too. So
Right.
there's like all four of us are the same age,
Okay.
basically.
Okay.
Before me, she had like, I think 7 to 11 other foster kids that she did before me.
Oh my
So what
gosh.
happens in foster care is that you get placed, and if everything works out, you get reunited with your family and you go home, right? And then you get out of the foster home and you leave, or you run away and then you never get seen again, or you get in trouble and you get positioned or placed in a psychiatric ward
Mm.
or a detention center. So that's like kind of your track, right? So sometimes they get replaced, or sometimes they go back to group home for whatever purposes that is. So even when I was in her foster home, I had multiple foster sisters, because they kept on rotating. So
Oh,
a
okay.
new one would come in, and
Got
then
it.
she would, one of them ran away, and then a new one would come in, and then she get replaced. And like, so I was actually her longest foster um, child because I didn't go anywhere. Like I literally was, I stayed, and that was 2 years, and that was I think like 2.5 years. But that
Okay.
was her longest track record of having one girl stay in one home.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So at least that gave you some sort of stability, I suppose, because you were in that home for 2 years.
Yeah.
And obviously you didn't reunite with your parents or your family. And then finally at 18 is when you became emancipated, right?
Right. So you don't really get a choice in emancipation. You get literally kicked out. When you
Yeah.
turn 18, there's another girl waiting for your position.
Okay.
So there's no such thing as the foster mother going, you know what, I really care about you. We have such a great relationship. I'm have you stay for another week. That, I mean, it just doesn't function in that world.
Mm,
And we are trained to know that there's an end date. So I think because there's an end date, it's very hard, I think, for a foster mom, to want to cultivate any type of relationship with you because it's going to end,
yeah.
right? So like
Yeah.
it's a relationship that's meant to end. So it's
Yeah.
I think it's really hard. Now some foster parents might go above and beyond and have this relationship with them afterwards. I'm sure that exists. But in the way I was brought up or in my home, that just was not an option. You leave at 18 and that was it. So, when I was in high school, I was bullied a lot, but what scared me more than the bullies was being homeless. Like that was my ultimate fear because my social worker told me, 30% of you will become homeless, 30% will become incarcerated, and 30% will become pregnant, and 10% might make it. Might make meaning you might get some type of job, and maybe you're living with your family's friend or something like that. And
Right.
of that, a very small percentage will actually become normally successful in that sense. You know. And when she told me that, it scared the living daylights out of me because I knew I wasn't going home.
Right.
So my plan was in high school, I'm going to go somewhere that had housing. And that's all I wanted. I just wanted to go somewhere that had housing. And so, the high school kids were talking like, oh, you should go somewhere with dorms. And I said, okay, perfect. I'll go dorms because dorms have housing and I won't be homeless. And that was it.
Right.
I didn't really care for higher education. Like I didn't really care for any of that. I just wanted not
You
to be
just wanted
homeless.
a roof over
So
your head. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I applied to the only school that actually accepted me. Like UCI did not accept me. UCLA didn't accept me. Like I got rejected by every school but Berkeley.
Oh,
And
wow.
I can't explain that to you. Like I can't. That there is a sense of divine intervention that you saw just carrying me through, and I just happened to walk through those doors that I got very
I believe
lucky
that.
to even be offered.
I was actually just going to ask you before you said divine intervention. Do you think that there was a spiritual element throughout your life and like angels, entering your life or people looking after you, from above? I mean, any of that, because I'm a very spiritual person. I'm Christian, but I also believe in things that don't happen by accident. They really are
Yeah,
angels or guardians or whoever, that come in and out of your life and look after you.
I I don't think I can live without being a testament of that. For everything that happens in my life, I know that I did not have enough foresight, enough intelligence, enough honestly willpower to make those decisions. I think those decisions were somewhat made for me, and I just happened to kind of go with the flow as it was happening.
Mm.
I think at that age when I was so young, you know, when I was staying with that home, before my group home, in my own little head, I thought this was again a sleepover.
Yeah.
When I applied to college, I thought, hopefully I'll go somewhere. Like so, there in a sense, I do feel very that there is a strong angel that's behind me, and I think that angel served so much of my protection growing up.
Yeah.
And then as I've gotten older, I have to almost heal with that particular feeling because I have to be kind of on my own now in that sense,
Yeah.
where I have to start my own healing journey. I have to start really kind of dissecting and really working through all the trauma. And I can't rely
Yeah.
on that angel to go, can you take care of me again? Because that's not how it is now. It was back then, but I think it's not. So I think it's a very interesting dynamic and relationship that you have with these kind of, whatever it is, spirituality or healing purposes in your life,
Yeah.
But when I shared my story about 2 years ago, and the reason why I was sharing my story, so I kind of hinted at the fact that I was in foster care, but that's it. No reason why. The way we're talking about it now, that did not exist 10 years ago when I first started blogging.
Right.
And I left it there because I didn't really think, one, no one believed me. Like I go through this, I think, journey of life thinking no one's going to believe me because my parents didn't believe me.
Right. Of
But
course.
going to court and having these jurors sit there, I realized, there's hope that strangers believe me, right? These people here sitting believe me. So this must be true to some extent. So I struggle with this truth growing up and starting my career in blogging. I was still, on the truth searching side, coming to terms with my own truth. So I left it there, foster care, and that's it. Nothing more than that. And even when I was sharing about foster care, people were like, well, what did you do wrong? Right? You must have done something wrong.
Yeah,
get
it's
yourself.
always like blame the victim, and that that narrative is starting to shift a little bit, but still, yeah, I'm sure you were blamed.
So I took that, I swallowed that, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to share anymore, and that's the end of that. And the only reason I shared 2 years ago is because my brother, he was getting married, and I was officiating his wedding. I love him to death. We're very, very close, and it's just the three of us, me, him, and his future wife, and that was it. And oh my gosh, May, I practiced for like months on my speech, and I was like, I wanted to be. I was like, I wanted to be there. I wanted to be on it for him. And he told me, he said, mom and dad's coming, so I just want to let you know. And this has been about 20 years since I've seen them. Since
wow.
And I said, okay, hey, it is what it is. This is not my day, it's your day. So I will be there for you, and I'll do everything I need to do for you. And then the day came, and I basically said, I would do my best. I'm not the troublemaker. I'm not going to say anything. If they approach me, I'll have a conversation with them. If they don't, that's okay too. And it came to that they didn't want to have a conversation with me. And, and also I wasn't necessarily going to have a conversation with them either. I wanted a sense of balance. And I wanted a sense of, I don't know what you call it, not fairness, but a sense of, I wanted to see that they're committed to this relationship as much as I'm willing to be committed to restart again, if that was the case.
Right.
And they didn't really express any interest. So I did my thing, and that was it. But, going back to what you're saying, it's just, I find myself extremely lucky in a lot of ways because I don't have to necessarily live with the trauma every day. I lived with it. I went to court. I did my thing. I got out of it, and I'm healing from the trauma.
Yeah.
But I don't really live with it, right? And I think a lot of young Asian girls, and this is after I shared, they basically started sharing, and I'm so incredibly grateful that they did because it felt like we were standing next to each other, holding each other up.
Yes.
And that was the most powerful part. But what saddens me most is that, and what I count my blessings on, is that there's so many young women, especially Asian young women, that still live with their predator, right? That they still see their cousin at New Year's, Lunar New Year, that they still see their uncles at bridal showers, and they live in this world that their truth will never, ever be spoken.
Right.
And they live with knowing that no one would believe in their trauma. And for me, that is the harshest sense of injustice.
Right.
So I feel like I've actually gotten my justice. And yes, that means I don't have necessarily a family to go to for a holiday. And that means that, if I ever get married, I'll walk myself down the aisle. Yes, all that. But I at least can have my truth spoken. And I think to not have that, you're robbing a young woman of that ability to heal. And I think that to me is the horror of what, trauma.
And I'm so glad, I'm so glad you're putting it that way, because this is something that you will live with for the rest of your life. Let's not kid anyone, right? It's not like all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I don't, it's fine. It's in the past. You live with these scars. You have the scars. We all have scars, right? And those scars don't go away, but you have now been able to come to terms with what happened because you've been able to move on, because you actually literally did have your day in court. But then also you've been able to process it because you've been able to get on with this path that you're on. But like you're saying, it's tragic when these other women, they don't even have scars yet. Their wounds are still open because they're constantly being reminded of their victimization whenever they have these family gatherings and they have not detached themselves from the family or the victim or the predator. And
Yep.
so that, yeah, you're right. That is a form of torture.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah. And
ongoing
and
torture.
and they can't, like, a lot of them can't share this to their significant other,
No.
right? Because they're scared of not, they won't believe them. And rightly so,
Right.
because they feel like their family's not seeing what they're seeing,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or there's families not acknowledging the grief or whatever, the trauma that this woman or this man's going through.
Right.
So
Right.
I can't imagine living in this cage, not being able to scream and not having your story be told. And I think
Right.
that in the end, I think that's suffering to a level that's very, very difficult for me to hear, even to read.
What would you say to women then? And I'm sure you've written back to women who have reached out to you, and girls, but what would you say to them? You know, for those women who are still in this situation, who feel like they're living this nightmare and, trapped in a cage, like you're saying.
Oh man, I wish there was a magic wand
Yeah.
or a magic anything that that I can share.
Right.
I think you know I hope that I can be here to remind them that their life is so much more worth it. And their life is has a lot more meaning. And these scars and wounds and healing sessions, um, like you said, will always be with them. But the fact is that I don't know really what to say, May. Like
Yeah.
I
I
wish
know it's
that
tough.
they have the luxury to scream and tell their parents, like, he did that to me, when I was
Right.
young, or they don't have those luxuries to do that, right? So, and if it's not their time, and if it's not something that they're comfortable with, I think it might cause more trauma than them not doing it, in
Right.
that sense.
Right. It's funny. I think what we started off in the beginning of this interview about how women sort of underestimate ourselves and our self-worth and value, and we kind of have self-doubts. And I think with this case, when you're victimized in this way, that probably is intensified 1,000 times, right? And for whoever's listening who might be in the situation, I think it's the same thing. We have to understand our value, right? You may not think you have much value, but you do. You're alive, you're breathing, and you need to free yourself from whatever bondage that you're in, whether that be physical or metaphorical. But we have to really kind of come to terms with the power that we have within us, that power of
Right.
survival, right? That you
Right.
have, that we all have through whatever traumas that we've all been through. And confide in somebody. I mean, I know that
Right.
you've said you've had angels that have helped you, but women, I think we have the gift of at least having those, maybe a friend we might be able to confide in, who
Right.
we can maybe trust in that way.
Right.
And maybe slowly that's the release that somebody needs,
Right.
to be able to come to terms with what has happened to them.
Right,
I don't
right.
know.
And I think to piggyback on what you're saying too is that, you know, I've been a part of um kind of group sessions myself where my friend has said something, and sometimes because you're in so much pain, it's hard to articulate the feelings that you have, right? So like you said, if you have someone that you can trust and confide in, and you're comfortable having them be in the room with you,
Right.
I think that's completely fair. Even that's completely just, and then hopefully this person can help at least give you room and space to share your story, which is
Right.
vocalizing it out. I think for me, being able to say it out loud has so much tremendous
Mhm.
healing powers that I did not think existed
Right.
from before, right? And I knew that happened when I was in court. But I was too young to realize what that meant. So I think healing also requires time, that the healing needs to be, that the healing would work,
Yeah,
right? Because
of
I,
course.
I was able to vocalize my story in court, but I was too young. So I think healing never took place at that point.
Hmm.
But the healing really took place 2 years ago, which was many, many, many moons later after my court date, right? And so I think if whoever's listening, if you are ready and you feel that you are in a place that you're comfortable
Yeah.
sharing, that is
Yep.
your time. And that's a time that is fair and that is just for you to really share your story,
Right.
whether you want to have someone else be there to help you or whatever it takes. But please realize that your story is real. Like your story has truth, your story is real, and you are believed. And I think
And
that,
and you're not alone, right?
yes,
I mean, once you are willing and able and courageous enough to speak about it, then you realize that there are so many others who have been through this kind of pain or this kind of situation who are willing to, help you through it. Like you have
right.
experienced when you finally talked about this openly 2 years ago, it was amazing the outpouring of
Mhm.
comments and people saying, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only
Yes,
one who experienced this. And, they come to find that no, there's so many others who've shared this experience and who are there for you and to support you. So I think that is crucial. And I think women, again, the beauty of women is that we are definitely creatures who are willing to share more and be a little bit
right,
more open once we know that it's safe to be able to go there.
right.
Yeah.
And it takes time, but it's your time. And I think that's the
Yeah.
most important part.
Yeah.
Now, today, or 10 years later, it doesn't matter. It is your time. And for some women, they might never want to share for whatever
Right.
reason it is that they have, right?
Right.
For others, they might want to share right away. But if no one's going to, don't let anyone take away that moment for you, because
Yeah.
that is extremely therapeutic and healing that, you know, it's only you can experience that.
Right. And I thank you for being courageous enough to speak out about it, because you do have a platform where a lot of people will listen and will understand and then take it a little bit, maybe a little bit more seriously than they would have if it had come from, somebody else. So Wendy, okay, so I'm going to shift gears for a
Okay.
second here because, we still want to talk about what your endeavors, have been. And more recently, you started a CBD like company, right? Or retail. I mean,
Right.
it's a retail
Yeah.
shop in New
Yes.
York.
Mhm.
And it's based on CBD healing and beauty and all these different products. But what I thought was
Yeah.
interesting was that you first started this because you were trying to research how to
Yes.
deal with your own physical pain
Yes.
that unfortunately had come out of the sexual abuse.
It's kind of strange because of the sexual abuse. My pelvic floor was actually damaged in the process.
Okay.
And, you know, a pelvic floor spasm can mimic very closely to a UTI.
Mm,
And so every time when I had one, people were like, oh, it's just a UTI. And I would go to urgent care and they write me a prescription of antibiotics. And that was it. Now it's on antibiotics for about, whatever, 12 to 14 days. And all of a sudden, I'll come back and I'll get another one. So I was on antibiotics every day because it was
oh,
just like, it was like the episode would be that long and then it'll go away and then I'll kind of come back all the time.
oh
And people were like,
man.
oh, it's just another UTI. And then I became resistant to most antibiotics out there.
Of
My,
course.
my funny brother was saying, he was like, oh, if there's a zombie apocalypse, when do you be the first to go? Because there's no antibiotics to help you
Oh
anymore. Because
my
like
God.
you've been resistant. I mean, I was just like, I think that's kind of true. So we went to this whole like, and then so they thought it'd be a better idea if they put me on subtherapeutic antibiotics, meaning that I would take it every day, a very little dose. And then even with that, I developed more resistance to all the antibiotics. And so a pelvic spasm, it feels like it's a very strange feeling. It gets accompanied with UTI symptoms,
Mm.
but it also has this kind of dull, like drum-like pain that's around that area a lot.
Ugh.
And I think so. It's kind of interesting. If I ever talk to a client at the store and they ever mention pelvic floor spasm, I would put my money on it that something happened to them. It's always triggered by trauma, right? It's either
Oh,
triggered by physical trauma
okay.
or sexual trauma. And
Okay.
that has happened to every client I've talked to.
Really?
One client had like a physical trauma where she fell off a bike or something like that, and it hit her, and that's how it got damaged. That's one instance in many that did not have any physical trauma. It's all about sexual
Some
trauma
sort of
that goes
sexual
with it.
abuse. Wow.
So whenever they talk about that, that's my first go to is that,
Mm.
hey, did anything happen when you felt like this was coming on? And can you trace back? And all the time they said, yes, something did happen to me. And that's our connection. Is that I
Wow.
know that because I've gone through it, and I know that you know
Right.
that that is a part of the healing process too.
Right. Right.
So I just spent some time studying CBD and really getting very deeply involved in the science of it.
Okay.
My one of my very close friend and also mentor is a cannabis physician that's been practicing for over 17 years,
Oh,
Dr.
wow.
Janella
Okay.
Chin.
Oh,
Yeah,
neat.
so we were working through it together, and she's been at the very beginning with Artemis Journey to now with my own health too. And I was experimenting a lot with CBD, and I realized that it worked. It just, I had to understand how to take it for my body.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the message that we translate to a lot at Artemis is that, one is that, it's a cumulative. So it actually just, and this is a thing that I think it's a hard a bridge for a lot of people because they're like, if I smoke pot, I'll get high right away. Why don't I feel anything for CBD? And that's not the same
Right.
chemical makeup that you're talking about, right?
Right.
And the same interaction with our own receptors that we're talking about. So, for example, if you take a thyroid medication, it actually works in about 2 or 3 weeks. If you take antidepressants, it usually actually works 2 and 4 weeks. If antidepressants work before that time, it's considered placebo, right? So it has to take some time for it to work.
Yeah.
CBD also takes 2 to 4 weeks to work. What does that mean? You have to take it consistently.
Right. Right.
So when I knew that, I was like, okay, I can't just spot treatment whenever I felt there was a spasm coming on. I had to take it consistently. And I was messing with my dosage because I didn't know what was my optimal dose and back and forth like that. And then I did the whole track. I found my optimal dose and I was on it because I wanted to get off of my pain pills. I wanted to get off of my antibiotics because it was
Antibiotics.
causing my
Yeah.
stomach to
Of
go into another
course.
zone. So I was like, that this is enough. Let me just do that. And I was able to do it. Like I was able to understand my dosing, my responses, my body, what was working, what was not working. And I went from 24 episodes to actually 2 in 2019 and
Wow.
0 in 2020. So this is the first time in my life that I've not had. I take it back. I was on antibiotics because I had a skin rash, but had nothing to do with
Right.
my
Right.
spasm. Yeah, this is my time
Wow.
in my life that I did not have. I did not need antibiotics for spasms in that sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's quite a testimonial right there.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
amazing. From 24 to
yeah.
0.
And 24 episodes. In each episode is between 5 to like 7 days.
Oh my God.
So it's not 24 days in a year. Is 24 times 5 to 7 days in a year.
Oh
So
my
I was
God.
at, all the photos that you're seeing pre-book before all this, I would just go shoot, come home, have a pad
And
between
always
me.
in
I'll
pain.
go shoot and
Oh
I'll be on
man.
the ground, or I'll go shoot and come home and then take more medication.
Oh,
So
that's
everything
terrible.
that you saw was, again, it became a different side of me that I think I wanted to be, the
Yeah.
healthy side.
Right.
But when I came home, it wasn't like that,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, so there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors there for you because you were like projecting this image that you had to for Wendy's
Yeah.
lookbook, but then, in reality, you were like in pain.
Yeah.
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 Oh my
All the
gosh.
time. And
Oh my gosh.
everything triggered it. So it can be a stress trigger. It can be taking too much coffee. It can be sad. It can be anything. So I was just bracing for it to trigger, and then I'll be like, okay, I have to call and get my antibiotics. And that was
Wow.
my training for so long. And now I thank goodness
Oh
I don't
my
have to do
God.
that anymore.
You
I
must
can take
feel
myself.
like liberated. This,
I do.
I
I
mean,
do. Yeah.
seriously.
I
Yeah.
I I the empowerment comes in knowing how to take care of myself,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not saying that I don't have spasm. It does exist. But when I see it coming, it's like having your period. When you see
Mhm.
the clamps come on, you're like, okay, I gotta, whatever, do my
Yeah.
thing, right?
Right.
So when I feel like I'm in a stressful situation, I know this week's gonna be stressful.
Right.
I know it's gonna aggravate it. I'm gonna take a higher dose of this and that, and
Right.
I would basically dose myself out to know how to interact with those experiences.
Right.
But
Right.
to me,
Right.
that was more empowering because I'm not relying on, necessarily drugs or feeling like antibiotics made me feel so shitty. It was just like my stomach was tore. Like it was just completely in this
Well,
like engine that kept on grinding.
taking that much antibiotics is just bad news, period.
Yeah.
So yeah. So,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm so glad to hear that you were able to take care of your own ailment. And now you're obviously sharing what you've learned with the doctor that you're working with and created Artemis. and these,
Yes.
this line of products for everything from, sleep to pain to body wellness, to
Yeah.
skincare, all of these different things, right?
Right, right. And I am a lab test girl. So in a sense, I love the science behind it. So
Yeah.
every product that we have, I have a lab test that goes against. I can tell you exactly what you're taking in that sense,
Oh,
which is kind
cool.
of rare in
That's
the
good.
supplement world, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't really know what you're really taking in that sense.
Right.
But if there's a client that comes in and that goes, "Oh, I took the CBD from this company, I loved it," what I do is I'll go and ask about lab tests from that company. And what I do is
Oh,
I'll try my best to match it with what we have at the store. If you wanted to switch, if you don't want to
okay.
switch, that's fine too. Then we'll keep you. I would say just keep on buying what you buy. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to
Yeah.
help you, whatever your journey is, right?
Yeah.
So if you're loving this product, keep on going.
And again, this business, this new business of yours, it's not like you planned on, yeah, I'm going to be a CBD, person and start selling CBD products. So you sort of fell into it
No,
because of your own needs, but also your
exactly.
own interests, clearly, because you're fascinated by this from a, chemist's point of view and,
Yes.
that kind of thing. Well, so, okay. So here's something that I'm always curious about now because of everything that we've all been through this year. COVID has obviously changed so many things about our lives, right? Everything from not being as social,
Yeah.
not going and doing a lot more more social things like we used to, events and parties and these opportunities to dress up and from head to toe. And so it's really changed, I think, a lot of people's attitudes on uh, beauty and fashion
Hmm.
and just
Hmm.
overall appearance and just what's
Hmm.
important, right? Reprioritizing. Have you
Hmm.
noticed that? I mean, because let's face it, Wendy, I mean, your whole business is based on the idea of looking good and being very fashionable and being very presentable. What have you noticed in this year that has changed overall in that
Yes.
sense?
I mean, as you probably saw, there were so many fashion retailers that went down this year,
Totally.
right? So many, and from fashion, I think was one of the toughest hitting industry when this happened, mainly because there's no need, like you said, to dress up.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very real thing. And then also, during this whole COVID, it's still existing now. But I did not go out and like buy new things.
Hmm.
Even if I was sharing an outfit, it's like it's basically restyling old pieces I had in my closet because I just
Ah,
didn't feel that it's right for me to go, I'm wearing this, you should buy it when you probably are looking for a job or
right,
when you're trying to recover from a particular struggle that you're going through because, this and that, right?
right.
So I don't know. I think my justice meter is very sensitive
Yeah,
when it comes to
that's good.
other people in distress in
That's
that sense.
good.
So I just feel like it wasn't fair for me to walk around thinking that it's right for me to
You
share
didn't
what
want
I've
you want
always
to
been doing.
flaunt it. I mean, look, because perfect case in point, Kim Kardashian, right? She got a
Mm,
lot of shit lately because she celebrated her 40th birthday in a very extravagant way. And people were like, nah, wrong time,
yeah,
bad taste,
yeah,
gone. And, and
yeah.
now they're saying their influence, the Kardashian influence is really dissipating. Like people have lost
Oh
their
wow.
taste for that because it's too much. Like you're saying,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
insensitive to sort of flaunt that at a time when people are suffering. So
right,
I love the fact that you
right.
were trying to keep that in perspective.
Oh yeah, like or it was very much about if you wanted to go out, I would suggest wearing this and this, but you've seen me wear this many times already, so it's
Yeah.
not just I went out to do it now or when I do it home post is still very basically my closet or my wardrobe
Yeah.
restyling differently. So and I was also doing a lot of I don't know what you call it, like, not really throwbacks, but kind of where it's more of a collection of outfits that you can kind of shuffle between.
Mm.
If you wanted to do color, these are all the outfits I've worn, that had, whatever color plays in the last, I don't know, 2 years. So
Yeah.
it was more about presenting value in a creative way, if there's anything like that,
That's good.
but not in a way that was like I'm wearing wearing a $5,000 gown right
Right.
now for no reason.
Right.
It didn't make any more sense anymore.
Right.
It didn't make sense
Right.
the first time. It's not gonna make sense this time either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've had to sort of tweak a little bit here and there and sort of reevaluate the way you present, what you do. So I love that. I mean, and I'm not just saying that. I think that tells me even more about the fact that you are being very wise and sensitive and genuine in what you're trying to do with your business, rather than just ignoring the reality of the world. And I think again that probably comes
Right.
from, you know, all of your previous experiences in your past, of trying to be sensitive and being very self-aware, and,
Yeah.
and also aware of your surroundings. So
Yeah.
that's really good to hear. So, well,
Oh,
Wendy,
thank
I
you.
mean, what's okay before I let you go? So, what's next for you? Or are you just going to keep plugging away with the CBD and Wendy's lookbook? And I mean, what do you have in your vision? Do you have a vision board?
Yeah.
Uh,
I have it. It's it's loosely made of like
okay.
particles.
Okay.
I gotta like put together. No, I think I love the reason why I love Artemis so much is that when ebook became it was my job, and I love my job, but I think there after you've been doing it for so long, it kind of the fire goes away a little bit, and then you gotta kind of restart the flame. I
Yeah.
think that happens with every job that you're in. So I think with Artemis, it gave me another outlet to be creative. And
Mm.
because of that, it reignited my flame for Winnie's lookbook. Because now I get to dress up. So it's like it became like my yin and yang to the balance of what I needed at this time.
Oh,
So
nice.
I really do appreciate about that. I think for us, for Colin and I, we love Artemis. We have and we love the brand and we want to help as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And we realize too that for some people, they just might need something stronger than the CBD that we have. And what we do at the store already is that we actually partner with a pharmacist at a local dispensary to go, this is what you're taking for CBD. You can go to her and do your cannabis THC side.
Oh, okay.
But eventually, when New York becomes legal, we would figure out a way to have a dispensary here too. So to extend
Mm.
our offerings from Artemis to having a stronger selection if you need it. If you want
Right.
to come in and and do something that's recreational, perfect. That's cheap for you. But what we really want to do is bridge those who want to come for recreational use to those who actually come for medicinal purposes, like
Right.
how I use it.
Right.
And then
Right.
figuring out how do we create that community for both,
Right.
so
Right.
that's what we're
Well,
working on now.
you might have to bring it to California because, we're free and clear of any restrictions about cannabis. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
with Dr. June and I, we're actually working on, she's actually been formulating my own, everything that I've been taking for the last year is from her.
Okay.
So it comes in this little pack and she gives it to me. She goes, I have everything in it and I'm tracking you. So I actually take my blood work and I'll send it back to her. So then she's very engaged in everything that I do. And we're showing promise in what's happening with me too, outside of pelvic spasm. So Dr. June and I we're thinking about working together in a way that can help other women as well,
That's
focusing on
great.
women's health in
Yeah.
particular.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Yeah. Cause
Yeah.
we women, man, we're complicated creatures, right? And so there's a lot going on in our bodies that need to be tweaked, on
Yeah.
occasion. So that's good to hear. Last question, Wendy. You mentioned Colin, who is your partner,
Yes.
both
Yes.
personal and business, right? So
Yes.
can I ask how long? I don't know anything about it. But how long have you guys been together?
Oh, you're so sweet. We've been together for almost 5 years now.
5 years.
5
Okay.
years. Yeah.
And everything's good. Are you? I don't know. Look. This is where I'm turning into like the auntie. Everything's good. I mean, are you thinking of
Yeah, exactly. That that. Um, so Colin's actually 10 years younger than me, which
Oh, he
was
is.
something
Go,
that
girl. I love it. Oh, I love it. Oh my God,
and
that's great.
yeah, not planned, right? Like my life has many, many blessings, and one of them is Colin. But not planned. I met him at a chef's table type of event.
Okay.
And he was one of the highlighted chefs there, and I just thought he was the cutest thing ever. And then I found out he was 10 years younger that day, and I was like, "No way, I gotta go!" And then he just kind of never stopped kind of
Oh,
chasing. So then we thought,
oh,
let's and so that was in LA. And then I moved to New York.
oh,
So
okay.
before meeting him, I said I just didn't really enjoy LA in that sense.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to live in New York. I'm gonna move to New York. I don't care. And I met him and I said, I don't care. 10 years younger, no way. I'm moving to New York. So let's get out of here and, all that. And then he said, well, you're going to be here for another, I think, 3 months. And I said, oh, yes. He goes, why don't we try for 3 months? It doesn't work. You go to New York, you're fine. We never have to see each other again. I said, okay. So we did it for 3 months. And then he ended up moving to New York afterwards. So
And the
we're
rest
both
is
here.
history.
And
Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
That's great.
He stepped up with Artemis, and so now we're business partners in the Artemis world too. He actually understands the food science side because he
Oh,
is
because
his
he's a
experience
chef.
as
Yes.
yeah, exactly, in
That makes
food.
sense. Yep.
But he actually understands the farming extraction side very, very closely too because of food,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Oh,
he takes more of plant and farming practices and all that cultivation, and I do more of the application. Like, how does that affect you, right? Like, how to taking
right.
CBD affects you as a human. And
Right.
he goes, well, these are the components in there that might affect me this way, but not,
Oh my God. That's so
whatever April
perfect.
this way. Yeah,
What a good
yeah, yeah,
partnership.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
perfect. Oh my
So
God.
very, very.
Well, the age gap, big freaking deal. I mean, Asian don't raisin. So, I mean, you already look 10 years younger. So I'm sure when you guys are together, like nobody would ever think you were 10 years older and he was 10 years younger. So that's,
He has this like beard that I told him you can never shave that thing off. You look like you're 12 and then I'll look like an auntie. And I'm
oh
like,
my
no.
God,
So he
no.
has this like full beard. And he's like, okay. So I've never seen without his beard.
Oh, that's so,
For the 5 years we've
oh,
been together, I've
no.
never seen him stand. Yeah, no beard. I've
Aren't you
never seen it. So
curious?
he was, yeah, yeah. He was joking. He's like, one day I'm going to surprise you. I'm like, you got to do that some other day because it's not happening today. So he has like a full beard all
Oh,
the time.
that's hilarious. Well, and obviously 5 years you've been together and you've come out with your story. And so I'm sure has been incredibly supportive in your journey, right?
Well, he was actually there during my crisis, whatever therapy session, and he was there.
Oh.
He actually became my bodyguard during the wedding. So he would literally stand in front of the door because I had my
Oh,
a little room off to the side to myself, and he would
okay.
go out and walk the walk to make sure that no one will get in my way if I needed to go anywhere in that sense to get to where I needed to go. But he was literally there the whole time, and even when I was up there officiating, he was just like walking around. So then
Oh my
the
God.
and we have this thing where if I'm before COVID when I am on a panel or whatever it is, he would be very visible so I can track him. So then at least
Oh,
I look like I'm looking across the room and I'm not. I'm just looking at him walking across the room.
okay.
And then that makes me feel like more comfortable as I'm
Safe.
talking
Yeah.
in front of people,
Right. Right.
So it was the same thing with the wedding. He would just like kind of walk back and forth. So then as I'm speaking and officiating, it looks like I'm making contact to everyone. And it was just looking at
Oh
him the
my
whole time.
God. Oh, okay. That is a good man.
Yeah.
That's a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's very, very
Oh,
sweet.
good.
And he
No.
cooks.
Any what? Any cooks? I know. Well, done, done, and done.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Wendy, I could continue talking to you for hours, but this has been amazing, and I knew it would be. I knew when I talked to you on the phone a couple of days ago, I'm like, this is going to be really a great conversation. So, and it has been. So, thank you so much for being again so open and willing to talk about all of these very important issues, and being somebody who is willing to be courageous to speak out about these topics that still unfortunately to this day are so taboo, and people have these stigmas, especially within the Asian community. So I'm grateful for that, and especially during this holiday season,
Yeah.
practicing the idea, of course, the concept of gratitude. We all should be so grateful, even in these times of difficulty. But we should also think about those who are in, terrible situations, dark times, and really not forget that there are those people who need, that extra care and extra support.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think now I think because of what's happening in the world, people are a lot more empathetic than they were before.
Yep.
So I think we're having these conversations is a very natural thing that, you miss your family. There are a lot of foster kids out there that don't have families. So
Yeah.
I think there's a level of connectiveness and consideration now because everyone's going through a similar path in
Right.
that sense.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We're all feeling a little separated from our loved ones. So
Yeah.
imagine if you don't even have that, in your
Yeah.
life. So yeah, let's all think about that and appreciate what you have. Don't take things for granted, but also I appreciate people like you who are willing to, again, step out, of their comfort zone and, bring the attention that's needed to these kinds of issues. So Wendy, you're amazing. You're
Oh my gosh.
fabulous.
Thank you for having me. Thank
So
you.
fun. It's
Thank you for, I want you to know that, whenever I have these conversations, like I want you to know that it really empowers me in the end and it gives me so much more fuel. So thank you
good.
for even asking, for even, for even having these type of open discussion. It really does help me. And I'm sure it helps a lot of other women
Good.
tremendously.
I hope so too. And I think it will. I think it absolutely will. So listen, I think you're fabulous. Keep doing what you're doing, with that humility and drive and passion. And we will definitely stay in touch. And at some point, I hope you do come out to LA, or else I can get to
I
New York and
will.
we'll meet face to face. But until
Yes,
then,
yes, no. I will. I will definitely see you. That's a date, whether here
yes,
or there.
yes,
It'll happen.
absolutely. Okay. All right, my dear. Take care and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
She is truly amazing and really someone who is using her platform and using her past and her pains, her ups and downs, for good. So I so appreciate the fact that she came on the show and was willing to be so open and honest, about her life. So thank you so much, Wendy. Before I go, usually at the end of my shows lately, I've been, asking for support because we started this Patreon campaign. But this time I'm not going to go there because I really want all of you to think about what everyone is going through right now, which so many people are going through right now. As I mentioned, at the beginning of the show, this is a very difficult time for many people who don't have much, and people are standing in line for hours to just get food from a food pantry. So if you have a way to give back, whether that be through donation, financial donation or food donation or your time to volunteer, do so during this season, because we can all share in being thankful and grateful and not taking things for granted, especially this year because we've all been through so much. But there are so many people out there without anything, without family, without friends, without the means. And so if there's some way you can give back, do it. Do it. There's been no time more pressing than what we are all going through right now. And so many people are suffering, and suffering in silence oftentimes. So try to do what you can. That's what I'm asking. And finally, I just want to end with this. I don't know if some of you read the opinion piece that Meghan Markle wrote in the New York Times. It came out yesterday on Tuesday. And she openly talked about a miscarriage that she went through in July. And she beautifully writes about loss and grief and pain. And she describes what had happened. And she talks about how at one point when she was in the hospital and her husband, Prince Harry, was by her side, just broken from the loss. And she thought of what to say to him. And she just said, "Are you okay?" And she talks about in this piece that oftentimes we don't ask that question to people and really mean it, right? We kind of maybe say it in passing thinking, oh, someone's just going to say, "I'm fine." But do we really mean it? Do we really want to hear, how they really are? And especially during this time of upheaval and uncertainty and pain, she describes this notion of asking people, "Are you okay?" So let me just read the end of this article because I think it's just really very timely. She writes, so this Thanksgiving, as we plan for a holiday unlike any before, many of us separated from our loved ones, alone, sick, scared, divided, and perhaps struggling to find something, anything to be grateful for. Let us commit to asking others, are you okay? As much as we may disagree, as physically distanced as we may be, the truth is that we are more connected than ever because of all we have individually and collectively endured this year. We are adjusting to a new normal where faces are concealed by masks, but it's forcing us to look into one another's eyes, sometimes filled with warmth, other times with tears. For the first time in a long time, as human beings, we are really seeing one another. Are we okay? We will be. So I thought that was a great way to end this show where, we were talking about pain, suffering, darkness, but then resiliency and drive and surviving and courage and hope. That together we can get through all of this. So during this season of Thanksgiving, let's be grateful. Let's not take things for granted. Let's not take each other for granted. And let's show each other what humanity looks like, what decency looks like, and what empathy looks like. Okay? So happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Please stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy yourselves, and I will see you next time.